Pregnant and kicked out of home, she sleeps on the street. Until a millionaire changes everything. Before the story begins, drop a comment saying where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these love stories can go. And if you're into emotional stories full of twists, resilience, and heartwarming endings, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and motivates me to keep bringing you stories that truly touch the heart. Avery. Sullivan clutched the strap of her torn backpack like it was the last thing tethering her to any sense of safety. Behind her, the door of the White House with blue shutters slammed shut with a thud as cold as the words she'd heard seconds earlier. The porch, where she used to play as a child, now felt like a courtroom. The hanging plant swayed slightly in the early evening breeze, but inside her, everything was a storm. "You destroyed our family," her mother had yelled before slamming the door. Her voice still echoed in Avery's memory like a slap. "Pregnant? No husband. No shame. You want that life? Then go live it on the street." Her father hadn't said a word. He just folded his arms as hard as stone. That hurt more than anything. Avery turned slowly and started walking down the sidewalk of the suburb she'd called home until that very moment. The sky was darkening, streaked with pink and orange, as if even the day itself was saying goodbye to her. Each step dragged. Her legs were swollen, her feet burning in worn-out sneakers. She was 7 months pregnant, but her parents hadn't even asked if she was okay, if she'd eaten. They just wanted to erase her from the family history like some shameful stain. The street was calm, but not silent. Dogs barked behind fences, kids rode bikes on the opposite sidewalk, and a distant radio played country music. Everything seemed to go on as usual except Avery's life, which had been split in two. "You're gonna regret this, Mom," she muttered, her voice cracking as she looked back one last time. But the kitchen window was shut. No silhouette appeared to watch her. She was truly alone. Sweat trickled down her back. Phoenix was still boiling even as the sun disappeared. But it wasn't the heat that hurt the most, it was the emptiness. The helplessness of being rejected, not by strangers, but by the very people who should have held her close in her most vulnerable moment. She carried a life inside her, yet she was treated like garbage. She walked to the bus stop but had no money for the fare. Looked around for somewhere to sit and thought about calling a friend, but who was left? The baby's father had vanished months ago after finding out about the pregnancy. Her college friends drifted away the moment she dropped out. Her family? Now just a bitter memory. It was already night when she passed a red brick church. The windows were slightly open, and the soft sound of a choir practicing floated out. Avery paused for a moment. The harmony was like a spiritual blanket, and for a few seconds she wanted to go in, but shame held her back. She felt unworthy even of a church pew. She raised her face to the dark sky, sprinkled with a few stars visible through the city lights, and whispered, "If anyone's up there, I just need a safe place. Just a place. Not for me. For him." She gently placed a hand on her belly. "He doesn't deserve this kind of beginning." Further ahead, downtown, she found a plaza surrounded by low lampposts and tall palm trees. The benches were dark wood, and one of them sat empty under a tree. Avery walked over with slow, heavy steps. She sat down, breathing with difficulty. She was hungry, thirsty, but mostly exhausted. Tired of existing alone, she placed the backpack on her lap and hugged it like a shield. Leaned her back against the hard bench, stretched her legs as much as she could, and closed her eyes. Cars passed in the distance, a few horns, laughter from young people crossing the plaza on the other side. No one noticed the pregnant woman sitting alone. No one stopped. Before falling asleep, her body begging for relief, she whispered a promise. "I'm not giving up on you. Even if I have to die sitting on this bench, you will be born. And you will be loved." And then she slept not, from comfort, but from sheer exhaustion. Her arms still cradled her belly, as if trying to shield that baby from a world that so far had only shown them abandonment. The night was deepening, but Phoenix's heat still vibrated in the air like a silent threat. The park bench where Avery had fallen asleep creaked softly as she shifted, instinctively seeking a less painful position. Her arms remained wrapped around her belly, as if that simple, instinctive gesture were her only defense against the world. Her breathing was uneven, and despite her light sleep, the wrinkle between her brows betrayed how even her dreams were heavy. Around her, the city slept in fragments. Cars passed in the distance, a siren screamed in a nearby neighborhood, and the dry wind rustled the tall palm trees surrounding the plaza. Shadows danced unsettling patterns on the concrete ground, but there in the middle of it all, a pregnant young woman slept with her knees bent, her head resting against the side of the bench, her face lit only by the dim glow of a weak street lamp. Her fragile body stood in brutal contrast to the vastness of the city around her. But no one saw. No one stopped, until, by a twist of fate, or perhaps something greater, a luxury car slowed near the plaza. It was a black SUV, polished like a mirror, with tinted windows and a silent engine. At the wheel, Logan Whitmore, 34 years old. Tailored suit, tired expression, a gaze perpetually serious, pulled over to take a call that had been ringing for minutes. He'd just left a charity event held at a luxury hotel in Paradise Valley, but hadn't paid attention to a single word spoken that night. He was there out of obligation, for appearances. The truth was, inside, he'd felt hollow for years. "Yes, Adam. I know I have to sign it by tomorrow," he said into his phone, voice restrained, eyes fixed on the digital dashboard. "But now's not the time. Call me early, please." He hung up, sighed, rubbed his face. He just wanted to go home, take off that suit jacket, and sink into his couch in silence. But when he glanced to the side, something made him freeze. There, just a few meters from the car, was her, the young woman on the bench. Small, curled into herself, hidden inside an oversized, worn-out jacket. Her light brown hair was tied in a messy bun, and even in sleep, her arms were wrapped protectively around her belly as if guarding a precious treasure from a cruel world. Logan stood still. There was something in that image that broke through. His coldness, that desperate way of protecting a life not yet born, was a mirror of what he'd been trying to forget for 3 years. For a moment, he tried to look away. But he couldn't. He turned off the engine, pushed the door open, and stepped out, not knowing exactly why. Each step felt heavier than the last. The night wind rustled the tree leaves like an ancient whisper. When he got closer, he could see her more clearly. The torn backpack at her feet, her swollen knees, her small hands trembling even in sleep. She stirred, mumbled something unintelligible, then let out a low groan, as if in pain. Logan felt a lump rise in his throat. "Miss," he said softly, his voice low and hoarse. She didn't answer. He stepped closer and crouched in front of her, hesitant. "Hey, are you okay?" Avery's eyes flew open with a jolt. For a moment, she was back at her parents' front door. The fear was automatic. She recoiled, clutching her backpack to her chest. "I don't have anything to give you. Please, just leave me alone." Logan raised his hands, like someone trying to calm a wounded animal. "I'm not here to hurt you. I saw you here. You're pregnant? You're alone? I just wanted to know if you need help." She looked at him warily. Her eyes were red but steady. Her pale, delicate face, lit by the weak lamp, showed the battle lines of exhaustion and dignity. "Are you a cop? Social worker?" "No," he replied, taking a deep breath. "My name is Logan. I was just passing by. And I saw you the way you're holding your belly." She looked away, biting her lip to hold back tears. "You saw too much." Logan dropped his gaze and spoke even softer. 3 years ago, my wife died while she was pregnant. Ever since, I've tried not to see anything. But today, I saw you." The silence between them was so intense it drowned out the sounds of the city. Avery looked at him again, this time with less resistance, but still with pain. "I'm not your charity," she whispered, "and I'm not trying to buy your gratitude." She stayed silent, then lowered her eyes to her belly and gently ran her hand across it. "He didn't ask to come into the world, but I'll fight for him, even if I have to sleep on this bench until the end." Logan felt small in front of her. He, the man who had everything, mansions, bank accounts, cars, had never seen so much strength in such a fragile body. Avery looked at him one last time, as if testing what was behind the kindness of a stranger. "If you want to help, don't say anything. Just let me sleep." Logan stood there, staring at the woman who had just disarmed him with 3 sentences. Something inside him had already shifted, but he didn't yet know how much. And in that moment, under the flickering glow of a street lamp in the plaza, something invisible was planted between them, and what seemed like just another night of abandonment was about to become the beginning of everything. Avery had already closed her eyes again, though sleep slipped through her fingers like sand. Every muscle in her body ached, but it was the invisible weight of loneliness that pressed her hardest against the wooden bench. She tried to ignore the presence of the man, that Logan guy, who still stood a few steps away as if unsure whether to leave or stay. But he didn't leave. Logan took a step forward, slipped off his dark jacket, and slowly held it out. His hands trembled slightly, maybe from the sudden chill of the night or from something deeper buried within. As he approached, he crouched in front of her and carefully, without touching her skin, tried to drape the jacket over her like one might cover a sleeping child. The moment the fabric brushed her shoulder, Avery jolted awake. She recoiled instantly, clutching her backpack protectively to her chest. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice shaking, laced with distrust. She tried to stand up quickly, but her body gave out. She staggered, her legs buckled, and the world spun. Logan caught her by the arms before she could fall. His grip was firm, but respectful. Their eyes met, and in that suspended second, there was no street, no bench, no night. In her eyes, fear, exhaustion, and pride. The wounded pride of someone forced to carry alone what should never be carried alone. In his, surprise, unease, and a sudden, almost old guilt. As if the scene had awakened something that had been dormant for far too long. Avery slowly pulled away from him, but she didn't run. "I don't want anything from you," she said through clenched teeth. "Not handouts, not pity." Logan didn't flinch. His gaze remained steady on her. "You don't even know who I am," he said calmly, almost in a whisper. Avery took a deep breath, holding back the emotion burning in her chest. Then she raised her head with quiet strength. "And you don't know what I've lost." "Silence, it," was a sharp reply, but full of pain. Logan felt it hit him, like each word had pierced a soft, unguarded part of him. But he didn't argue. Instead, he walked back to the car, opened the passenger door, and returned. "I just want you to come with me. It's not far. There's a clean couch, food, water, and a warm bathroom," he said, his voice now slightly unsteady. She shook. Her head, eyes fixed on the ground. "I've already learned nothing comes free. Nothing." He knelt. That image sliced through the silence of the night. A man in a suit, rich, polished, kneeling on the pavement of a public park before a pregnant, dirty, exhausted, suspicious woman. Logan looked straight into her eyes. "You shouldn't be sleeping out here." not with a baby on the way. This isn't charity, it's just human. Avery hesitated. On the outside, she was still tough, shoulders tense, jaw clenched. But inside, something began to crack. It wasn't his words. It was his eyes. There was no pity in them. There was truth. And even though her instincts screamed to resist, her body trembled. "If I get in that car, it's not because I need you," she murmured. "It's because I need to protect my son." Logan nodded slowly. "That's the best reason anyone could have." She took a deep breath, cast one last glance at the bench where she'd spent the last few hours, and like someone stepping off a cliff, walked toward the car. As he gently closed the door, she still held her backpack tightly. To her chest, it was still a shield. Still pain, but there was something new in the air, the beginning of change. A seed of trust. Small, silent, but a live dot, and as the car pulled away into the early morning, Avery looked out the window and saw the bench fading behind, lit by a lonely street lamp. She didn't know it yet, but that night, the night when everything felt lost, would one day be remembered as the night her story began to change. The silence inside the car was absolute. Avery, in the passenger seat, kept her arms crossed over her belly and her eyes fixed on the window, as if still deciding whether this was real or some unsettling dream. Logan drove slowly, stealing discreet glances in her direction but respecting the distance she demanded through posture alone. She didn't ask where they were going. Maybe because she feared the answer. Maybe because she was simply too exhausted to argue. When the car stopped in front of the brightly lit facade of a private hospital, Avery turned to him sharply, her face marked by shock and resistance. "This isn't necessary," she said, her voice tense. "I don't need a hospital. I just need somewhere to spend the night." Logan turned off the engine and met her gaze firm. "You almost collapsed trying to stand. You're pale, feverish, and haven't eaten in days. This isn't about comfort. It's about your health." She pressed her lips together, eyes brimming with frustration. "You don't have the right to decide for me." "I know," he replied softly, "but if something happens to you or the baby, and I stood by doing nothing, I'll never forgive myself." His words betrayed him. They revealed more than he'd meant to. Avery furrowed her brow, sensing there was more behind that sentence. But she said nothing. She was weak. And though her spirit wanted to hold on to its armor, her body cried for help. She got out of the car without another word. Minutes later, inside the maternity observation ward, Avery passed out. Through exams, hydration, and evaluations, the world became a blur. She felt too light, disconnected from her own body. She didn't know if she was dreaming, floating, or had finally gotten some rest. She woke to the soft glow of indirect lighting on the ceiling. The walls were white, clean. The sheet covering her was soft and smelled of lavender. The first thing she felt was the weight on her arm and foreline. The second, the hospital ID band on her wrist. And the third was panic. She sat up with a jolt, gasping. No, I wasn't supposed to be here. Her heart raced. She felt invaded, vulnerable. She yanked the 4 out instinctively and tried to get out of bed, but her legs gave way. Before she could fall, a nurse rushed into the room. "Miss Sullivan, please, calm down," the nurse said, firm but gentle. She was a middle-aged woman, warm brown skin, a blue coat, and eyes full of experience. "Who told you to bring me here?" Avery's voice came out like a muffled cry. The nurse took a breath before answering. "The man who brought you in covered everything, and he made it clear you're free to leave whenever you want. He only asked one thing." Avery raised her eyebrows. "Of course, I knew there'd be a price." "It's not that," said the nurse, walking to the nightstand. She picked up an elegant business card, its letters embossed and subtle. "He Just ask that if you woke up. We tell you this. He's lost a baby before. The words struck like lightning. A chill ran down Avery's spine. How did he know? There was no answer. She took the card with trembling hands. Read the name, printed in sober elegance. Logan Whitmore. The name felt heavier now, denser, as if it carried not just wealth, but scars. Avery closed her eyes for a moment. The memory of him kneeling in front of her, the way he looked at her. Belly, the way his voice cracked when he spoke of humanity, it all made more sense now. He hadn't just seen a pregnant woman on a bench. He had seen a past that still haunted him. But why her? And why now? She clutched the card to her chest, and for the first time in a long while, didn't know whether what she felt was fear or gratitude. The morning arrived slowly, painting the hospital windows with a golden light that felt out of place compared to what Avery felt inside. She'd slept poorly. The mattress was comfortable, but her mind refused to rest. The name Logan Whitmore still echoed in her head, full of questions she didn't know how to ask, or maybe she did, and was just afraid of the answers. Sitting at the edge of the bed, bare feet on the cold floor, she stared at the business card on the knit-stand, like it was a riddle. She still didn't understand what drove that man. Genuine kindness? Guilt? Some hidden motive? That's when the door opened slowly. Logan stepped in silently, wearing a light shirt with the sleeves rolled up, dark jeans, and an expression that was contained, but not cold. He held a coffee in one hand and a paper bag in the other. His eyes sought hers before he said anything. I brought coffee and some muffins. The nurse said you skipped breakfast. Avery didn't answer right away. She was too tired for politeness, but strong enough not to stay quiet. Do you always invade people's lives like this? Bring food, pay hospital bills, and disappear after? Logan let out a soft sigh and set the items on the table, then crossed his arms and leaned against the wall near the window. I saw someone about to vanish, and for the first time in years, I couldn't look away. The sentence hung in the air like a blade. Avery looked away, her fingers gripping the white sheet. I didn't ask you to do anything for me. I know, he said, voice lower now, but that doesn't mean you deserved any less care. She took a deep breath, trying to sort through the mess inside her chest. Part of her wanted to get up and leave. The other part was just too tired to keep fighting alone. So now what? You gonna drop me off at another park? She asked, her voice laced with veiled irony. Logan stepped forward but kept a respectful distance. I have a guest house on the edge of my property. No one will bother you. You can stay there for a while until you get back on your feet. Why? She pressed, eyes narrowed. What do you get out of this? You already know my wife died pregnant, he said, struggling with the words. Her project was to turn one of our abandoned buildings into a center for mothers in crisis. She never got to finish it. I never had the courage to go on with it. But if you help me get it off the ground, maybe we can give some of this pain a purpose. Avery stayed silent. That wasn't what she expected. She expected a favor in exchange for obedience. A man trying to ease guilt with control. But what she saw was something else. A request, an invitation, almost a confession. I'm not your responsibility, she said, steady, and definitely not your charity case. Then help me build something that matters, Logan replied without hesitation. For the first time in years. Avery looked at him more closely. In that moment, he wasn't a millionaire seeking redemption. He was just a lost man trying to reclaim some part of himself. And maybe, without realizing it, so was she. If I say yes. There are rules, she said, standing slowly. I decide when I leave. No questions about the baby's father. And I don't owe you anything. Logan nodded, solemn. Deal. Avery crossed her arms, more out of habit than defense. And just so we're clear, this doesn't change who I am. I'm still someone the world threw away. He gave her a small smile, the first real one she'd seen on his face. Maybe that's exactly why you can see what I haven't in years. Avery didn't reply. She picked up the coffee from the table, took a sip, and turned toward the window. Outside, the sky was already clear. Phoenix burned, as always. But for the first time in a long while, she wasn't sweating from fear, but from uncertainty. A subtle difference, but a vital one. She didn't know it yet, but by accepting that offer, she was opening the door to something neither of them had expected, a mutual rebuilding, slow, painful, and transformative. The guest house where Avery now slept sat at the back of a property surrounded by tall trees and discreet fencing. The architecture was understated, with wide windows, light furniture, and dark wood details. Despite being located in one of Phoenix's most expensive neighborhoods, the space wasn't luxurious. It was quiet, functional, and for some reason, welcoming. Avery wasn't fooled. She knew it was temporary. That's why she treated the space as if it were hers. She washed dishes right after eating, made the bed neatly, folded the donated clothes she wore. Even as her belly grew heavier by the day, she insisted on showing she wasn't a burden, that her dignity didn't depend on where she slept. Logan, from outside, observed her from a distance. There were discreet cameras on the property, but he preferred doing the rounds himself, under the pretext of checking the security system. The truth was, without realizing it, he had begun to find comfort in seeing her there. The way she hung dish towels, how she murmured softly to the baby, how she hummed an old tune while scrubbing the floor with a folded cloth under her knees. Avery never asked for anything, and that was what disarmed him. This woman, who should have been fragile, radiated a silent strength he couldn't explain. On a Wednesday night, the sky gave way. The storm arrived with long flashes of lightning and thunder so loud it made the windows tremble. The lights on the property flickered since dusk, until, at 9, everything went dark. The main generator failed. Avery lit 2 small candles, setting one on the counter and another in the center of the small dinner table, improvised from stacked wooden crates. She was cutting an apple when she heard a knock at the door. It was Logan. He held a flashlight and carried a thermos of tea. His shirt was rolled to the elbows, and his hair damp with raindrops from the surprise downpour. "Looks like the generator decided to take the night off," he said with a faint smile. Avery returned a half smile and stepped back to let him in. "There's a candle left if you want to pretend it's a romantic evening." Logan chuckled softly but didn't answer. He just stepped in slowly, taking in the space. The smell of fresh apple, melted candle wax, and rain lingered in the air. "I made chamomile tea," he said, placing the thermos on the table. "Wasn't sure if you liked it." She nodded. "I do. Even without sugar." They sat across from each other on simple chairs. The candle flame between them cast soft shadows on the walls. The silence was comfortable. For a while, neither spoke. The sound of rain filled the room with a hypnotic rhythm, until Avery, holding her cup with both hands, looked up and broke the quiet. "Do you miss her?" Logan took a while to answer. His fingers traced the rim of his mug slowly. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost weightless. "Every day." But silence became my way of surviving. Avery didn't look away. He was there. No masks, no rehearsed lines. She smiled softly, though something wet shone in her eyes. "I became silence for a lot of people too," she confessed. "Not because I wanted to, but because it was easier than hearing one more person say I ruined my life." Logan's eyes tightened as if absorbing the weight of her words. And then, for the first time, he looked at her like he was truly seeing her. "You are anything But a mistake, he said, in a tone so honest it made her heart skip. Avery dropped her gaze, bit her lip, fighting back the emotion that threatened to rise. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. No pity, no filter, just truth. In that moment, they weren't millionaire and homeless. They weren't a traumatized man and an abandoned woman. They were just two broken hearts, trying to hear each other in the dark. The candle burned slowly, and the storm outside raged on. But inside that small house, something had begun to glow, something neither of them dared to name. Not yet. The next day dawned under a cloudless sky as if the universe were trying to make up for the storm the night before. In the small guest house, the scent of warm bread filled the air. Avery, her hair pulled back into a loose bun, wore a simple cotton dress gifted by one of the estate staff. There was light in her face now. The tension of those first days seemed to have softened, if only slightly. She was arranging a small shelf of old books when she heard voices outside. Firm footsteps, high heels tapping sharply against the stone path leading to the front door. It wasn't Logan. He always arrived quietly, curious and alert. She opened the door slowly. Standing on the porch was a tall, slender woman in a pristine white blazer, sunglasses, and blonde hair tied into a perfectly aligned ponytail. Arms crossed, posture stiff, and even through the dark lenses, her gaze felt cold and judgmental. She looked like someone who had never once accepted being ignored. "So this is where you've been hiding," the woman said dryly. The famous silent guest. Avery narrowed her eyes but held her ground. "And you are?" The woman removed her sunglasses slowly and gave her a venom-laced smile. "Victoria, Logan's ex-sister-in-law. And apparently the only one in this family still living in reality." Avery said nothing, just studied her, trying to figure out whether this was a visit or an ambush. Victoria didn't stop. "You must feel very special. I imagine it's not every day a billionaire offers shelter to a random pregnant woman." Avery crossed her arms, holding back the urge to slam the door. "I didn't ask for anything, and I don't owe you an explanation." Victoria took a step closer. "No? Then maybe I should tell you a few truths since you didn't have the guts to." Avery didn't speak, but something in her chest tightened. Her instinct screamed, "Something big is coming." "Did you know Logan's wife died giving birth?" Victoria shot out. "Did you know it was the labor that killed her?" Time seemed to stop. They were expecting a baby girl. The baby died before delivery, and Rachel, she died in surgery. That was the last day Logan truly smiled. The ground tilted beneath Avery's feet. Heat rose in her body, not physical, but emotional. A heavy, sickening puzzle piece locked into place. Victoria wasn't done. "You really think he brought you here out of kindness? You're carrying the ghost he lost." The words hit like a blade, deeper than Avery wanted to admit. Suddenly, every recent memory shifted. The way Logan avoided touching her, how his gaze drifted from her belly, the way he changed the subject every time they spoke of the future. It all made sense, a painful, heartbreaking sense. And not the kind she wanted to learn like this. "That's why he never really looked at me," she murmured, her eyes glassy. "He wasn't seeing me, he was seeing her." Victoria just shrugged. "You're nothing more than a convenient replacement." Avery shut the door slowly, saying nothing more. She walked to the bookshelf, eyes burning, hands trembling. Each step felt like an invisible blade slicing through her pride. Minutes later, Logan walked in, carrying a paper bag with fruit and a quiet, sincere smile. "I got those apples you like." She stared at him for a long moment before speaking. "You helped me, but you never truly saw me." Logan's brow furrowed, confused. "Avery, what? You saw what you wanted to see. A chance to fix the past. To save the one you couldn't." Her voice cracked with every word. "But I'm not your second chance, Logan. I'm someone just trying to survive with dignity." He tried to step closer. "That's not what this is. It doesn't matter how you see it. It matters how it makes me feel." She walked past him, tears streaming down her face. She picked up the old backpack still folded in the corner. I was starting to believe, but I was wrong, and she left, leaving Logan standing in the middle of the room, still holding the apple she would never taste. The Phoenix night was stifling, heavy, as if the heat had failed to leave with the setting sun. No breeze, no relief, just the orange haze of streetlights casting still shadows over cracked sidewalks. The silence in the streets didn't feel like peace. It felt like abandonment. Avery walked slowly through the sleeping city, her shoulders slumped, hands resting on her taut belly, eyes distant. Her steps were unsteady. The backpack on her back was heavy, but not nearly as heavy as the ache in her chest. Since she'd left Logan's house, it felt like she was fading, piece by piece. Each block blurred a little more of her world. The scene with Victoria played on repeat in her mind like a needle stuck in a broken record. The revelation, Logan's silence, the emptiness in his eyes. She thought she had finally been seen. Instead, she'd been nothing more than a reflection of a past that wasn't hers. As the night dragged on, the first contractions began. At first, they were soft, almost confusing, then rhythmic, demanding. Her body wasn't waiting anymore. It was taking over. She sat for a moment beside a metal trash bin near an abandoned parking lot, panting, sweating, her forehead pressed to her knees. The pain came in waves now. Each new spasm brought a low groan and clenched eyes. "Not now," she whispered. "Please, not here." But the baby wouldn't wait for safety. On the other side of the city, Logan was tearing through the streets like a man possessed. He'd stopped at shelters, clinics, bus stops. He had checked the guest house 4 times, called hospitals, contacted rideshare drivers, reached out to friends. No one knew where Avery was. No one had seen her. Every minute chipped deeper into him. He relived every gesture that had gone unspoken, every silence, every time he'd looked away from her instead of at her. Her voice rang in his ears. "You helped me, but you never truly saw me." He pulled over near a dim alley, jumped from the car, scanning the shadows. Then he saw it. Something on the ground near a trash bin. The blue dress she used to wear under her jacket, wrinkled, dirty, abandoned. "No, no," he whispered, dropping to his knees and grabbing the fabric. Her scent still clung to it. Oh God, Avery. That's when he heard it. A muffled sound. A cry. Half pain, half plea. Logan sprinted toward the sound, rushing into the deserted parking lot of a closed market. And there, between 2 concrete columns, lit only by the flickering sign of a long-shuttered store, was Avery, collapsed on the ground, breathing hard, legs trembling, one hand between her thighs as her body pushed forward without mercy. Her face was drenched in sweat, her eyes half shut, hair plastered to pale skin. "Avery!" he shouted, falling to his knees beside her. She could barely lift her head. Her voice came weak, barely audible, soaked in pain. "Don't leave me now." Logan took her hand, gripping it tightly, his desperation thick in the air. "You're all I have." Avery looked at him. Her eyes, though dimmed, still held the same pride, the same pain. "Then why did you push me away?" she whispered. Logan swallowed hard. His voice cracked before words could even form. "Because I was scared," he admitted, broken. Scared of losing again, of loving and watching it all fall apart. But now, he held her hand tighter, tears brimming in his eyes. "Now, I'd rather lose everything than lose you." Avery closed her eyes for a moment. And for the first time since the contractions began, she cried, not from pain, but from surrender. The sky was still dark when the cry broke the silence of the night. On the cold pavement of that dimly lit parking lot, beneath the flickering 24 hours sign, Avery screamed through the searing pain, her body arched, fingers digging into Logan's hand. He knelt beside her, his knees scraped and blackened with asphalt, his face twisted with anguish, as if every one of her cries tore through him. The ambulance he had called seemed like it would never come. "You're gonna make it." Logan whispered hoarsely, desperate. "Stay with me. Please, stay with me." Avery no longer replied. Pain had overtaken her completely. She gasped, sweated, screamed, but her eyes were open, sharp, unwavering, determined to bring that life into the world, even if it meant doing so alone. Even if it meant doing it on concrete, but she wasn't alone anymore. Logan held her head with a cry, faint, but alive. Avery opened her eyes and saw, between her legs, a small, slick body coated in blood and fluid. The paramedics had finally arrived. One knelt with gloved hands, cleaning the newborn with practiced speed, while the other checked Avery's vitals. "It's a girl," one of them announced, lifting the trembling little body and placing her gently on Avery's chest. Avery cried, but not like before. It was a quiet cry, a cry of release, disbelief, and something close to grace. She wrapped her arms around her daughter, pressing her face to the baby's warm skin. The child's skin was pale, her hair dark and wet, her tiny arms shaking like leaves in the wind. Logan stood in silence beside them. His eyes shimmered, his lips parted, as if witnessing something divine. He didn't know whether to speak, kneel, or simply give thanks. His breath caught as he watched the newborn in Avery's arms. Avery slowly lifted her gaze and looked at him. The words took effort, but they came clear and sure. "What will her name be?" he asked, softly, reverently. She ran her hand over her daughter's damp hair and answered with quiet strength. "Hope." Logan swallowed hard. The name echoed inside him like a prayer, because even at rock bottom, Avery added, "I never stopped believing." He stepped closer, reached out, and with the gentlest touch imaginable, placed his fingertips on the newborn's forehead. Then he closed his eyes, as if asking for forgiveness and offering thanks at once. That baby wasn't just flesh and blood. She was redemption. She was the life he thought he'd never have the courage to hold again. She was a chance to love without fear, because, for the first time, he understood. Love didn't have to be perfect. It only had to be real. Time passed. But the memory of that night never faded for either of them. Months later, the setting was entirely different. There was no longer cold asphalt beneath her body, nor shadows casting fear over hope. Now there was a home, not a mansion with towering columns and marble hallways. Logan still had that. But it was the small white house at the back of the property that he came to call home. That's where Avery chose to stay. That's where hope gave her first smiles. And that's where, between bottles, nursing textbooks, and long afternoons in silence, love stopped being a promise and became a choice. Avery spent her mornings attending a local nursing program with her backpack slung over her shoulder and hope in her arms whenever she couldn't leave her with the kind nanny Logan had hired. She still wore simple clothes, but now she walked with something she never had before, dignity in every step. She didn't feel rescued, she felt capable. And that changed everything. Logan had changed too, and not just inside. He used part of his fortune to transform abandoned buildings from his development company into transitional housing for single mothers and women facing homelessness. His legal team advised against it. They warned it might tarnish the corporate image. He ignored them. "I'd rather be remembered for sheltering lives than selling empty concrete," he said once, during the inauguration of the first shelter, the name on the buildings. Facade was simple, Casa Rachel and Hope. That day, Avery held Hope in her arms, dressed in a hand-embroidered pink onesie. The baby beamed, her eyes shining with Logan's, a surprising blend of past and future. "Are you sure about this?" Avery asked as the crowd approached the newly renovated building. Logan looked at her and smiled gently. "I've never been more sure of anything. There's no point in having so much if no one feels welcome inside." She rested her head on his shoulder. The world outside was still hard, unfair, full of walls. But in that space, born of pain and rebuilt with faith, there was a new beginning, not just for them, but for other women who, like Avery, had once fallen asleep on park benches with nothing but their arms around their bellies. Hope was growing, up surrounded not by luxury but by love. She said her first words on her mother's lap, took her first steps gripping her father's large fingers. She wasn't known for her last name, but for the light she carried. Because to Logan, that little girl was more than a daughter. She was his second chance at being whole. One autumn afternoon, as the two of them watched Hope stumble through the lawn of the newly opened shelter, Avery whispered, "I used to think I was invisible." Logan gripped her hand firmly. "And I used to think I didn't deserve to feel anything anymore," he replied. "But then you showed up and taught me what true worth really means." She smiled, her eyes shimmering. "You know I didn't come here for wealth, right?" "I know," he said, watching their daughter. "But you gave me the only kind that truly matters." They learned together, through stumbles, scars, and silence, that real wealth isn't found in mansions or measured in numbers. It lives in choices, in quiet embraces, in simple names embroidered into hand-washed clothes. It lives in the hearts of those who love without needing to own. And, above all, it lives in those who choose to welcome, rather than judge. Now tell me, what did you think of this story? From 0 to 10, how deeply did it touch your heart? Drop your rating in the comments and share what moved you the most in this journey of pain, love, and resilience. I read every single message with care. If this story stirred something in you, don't forget to share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe